Good morning. I'm Brian Noble, CEO of Family Policy Institute of Washington.
Good morning, and I'm Brad Payne. I'm president of FPIW Action.
A couple of disclaimers before we get started today. This is in no way an endorsement of a candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW, nor FPIW Action. It's simply a public service for a meet and greet and to get to know the candidate. This will be recorded and placed on several different platforms. Brad, why don't you ask our first question and introduce our guest?
All right, Ronda, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. You're bright and early out of the gate. So first question's pretty easy. Just want you to state your name, the position you're running for our listeners, and then if you give us a little bit of background about yourself and a little bit about your family.
Wonderful. Well, my name is Ronda Litzenberger. I'm running for state senate in the 2nd Legislative District. A little bit about myself. My family homesteaded in Washington 6 years before it was a state. I was raised in the 2nd Legislative District and I've raised my children here. It is my home and my heritage. I love where I live. I love our communities and I love the rural communities that kind of form the 2nd Legislative District, South Pearson, South Thurston County. I have 5 children and they all now have moved back to Washington. Most of them live in the 2nd. I have one that just lives right outside the boundaries. I'm so honored by my children and my grandchildren. I have 7 grandchildren as well. The one thing I love about my family is that at our dinner table, we have robust conversations because we have lots of diverse opinions that are coming forward. My oldest son is a doctor. My second is an attorney. My oldest daughter is a conservation biologist and science teacher and teaches highly capable. Number 4 daughter is a she has her business degree in global relations and works for SpaceX. And my youngest daughter is a middle school teacher. So you can imagine the that we have from all perspectives. I also have a son-in-law who's in law enforcement. And so we have lots of topics around current issues that are going on. Let's see, what else do you need to know? We were cattle ranchers. We've owned a small business for 35 years, construction development. So land use, property rights, all of those things are really important. I've been a school board director for 16 years. During that time, I've been elected to the Washington State School Board Directors Association's Legislative Committee, where I've spent lots of time helping to create policy that we want to see move forward, advocate for some policy, and as you know, advocate to stop some policy. We've sat downstream of a lot of bad policy in education, as well as business owners and property owners as well. And that's one of the things that's motivating me to run for office, is that idea of 60 seconds behind the dais isn't enough.
Okay, so you talked about some of your motivations for running for office. What do you see the primary role is, and what is just giving you that energy as you go, that motivation?
Motivation to run. Well,
yeah.
As Washington State School Directors Association legislative member, as well as I'm the small schools advisor for Washington State School Directors Association. In that capacity, I represent 198 small and rural schools and also communities. So what we know about small rural schools is that the schools are the biggest employer. So economic development is really important in those cases. Infrastructure is really important in those cases. I am an economic development advocate in Eatonville, vice president of Eatonville Business Association, chair of the Eatonville Vision team. So I know that really communities, they succeed best when all areas of government and community are working together. And so I've spent time in Olympia really trying to communicate the needs of small and rural communities and families and parents. And again, you've sat on that side of the dais. Sometimes you think you're going to get 3 minutes. It usually goes down to about 60 seconds of trying to share your message. And it's time for somebody to be in committee meetings, in Olympia, in that Senate chair that's going to listen to what we have to say, that's going to bring perspective for the 2nd Legislative District, but also as a parents' right advocate and as an education advocate and as a small business owner who really understands the burden of providing a paycheck for employees. So that's my motivation. Make sure stories are heard.
All right.
Well, you've hit on a lot of different concerns already legislatively. 2 questions. What would be your main concerns legislatively, like your top 2? And then what do you hope to accomplish in office?
Well, I think as I'm going around our communities, really there are a few things that come to rise to the top. Affordability is number 1. Everybody is dealing with that affordability of housing, being able to put gas in their tank, food on their table, My concern is I want my children and grandchildren to be able to live in the communities they were raised and have a safe place for their kids to play and to have a top-notch education that's back to the basics. As I'm in certain areas, communities in a second, those that are Yelm in particular that just had a double levy failure, education rises to the top for them. Education is really near and dear to my heart. We need to reestablish faith in our education system. We need to get away from agenda-driven decision-making and focus on the things that are going to help our children graduate from high school and be successful, whether that's on a career track, military track, or career and technical education. All of those things are really important. And so many of those issues are being legislatively driven. So I think the decisions, and one of the things I hope to do is to have an impact on the conversations and those legislative policies that are moving downstream. Public safety is another one. We have a juvenile crime that's going on right now of epidemic proportions. Mm-hmm. We need to get that under control, and I believe it's a lack of accountability for juveniles. We need to make sure that they are having the opportunity to receive some help and support, rather than just not holding them accountable until they reaches a point where they're committing a crime that is heinous, really, honestly. And so, and then the decriminalization of drugs is a big part of that, of the crime that we're seeing in the homelessness that we're seeing. So those are the issues that I think really need to be tackled immediately. There's always going to be, we want to be property rights. Of course, I'm a huge property rights advocate. I want to make sure we protect our Second Amendment rights and religious rights. But there's three big things right now that I think we need to take immediate action on to help the next generation.
All right. Our fourth and final question is, we've provided for you our 18 issues or policies that FPIW Action and FPIW is working on. Any of those that you would like to comment on? And for our listeners, there are things like housing, transportation freedom, individual freedom, healthcare freedom, that kind of thing. Any of those?
Well, first of all, I love your list. Everything on this list, I think, is really important. And I'm so grateful that we have advocates like you that are working. And not only that you're advocates, but you're bringing professional input so that we can make informed decisions in the legislature. I appreciate that very much. Again, I would like to speak maybe a little bit around parental rights. It's something that I've worked really hard on. I was chosen to sit on the Comprehensive Sex Ed Board for Washington State. I was one of 3 school board directors. And during that time, it became very apparent to me, as I was the only one that was against a lot of the work that was going on there, that not all parents' voices were being heard. Mm-hmm. And neither was mine. When it came time to testify, I was not given the opportunity to give the dissenting voice around comprehensive sex ed for that, particularly that very young K-5. That's where our biggest concern was. And so as a school board director, we have listened. I understand the frustration of parents. We passed a school board policy in our district that not only talked about the rights that parents have, but also the responsibility to be partners in education and advocating for their children. There is no greater teacher for our children than our parents. So I think keeping that core at the center, that parents have the right to educate their children, schools should be a support for that. And rebuilding trust in the system, I think, is going to be really, really, really important. And then I'd like to touch on affordable housing. As a small business owner for 35 years, affordable housing has been kind of our niche. That's our bread and butter. 35 years ago when we started, our first building permit was $700. I could get my building permit, finish the house within 90 days. Today, same kind of footprint, 1,000 square feet, $29,000 for the building permit. You're lucky if you get the permit in a year. And it takes about a year and a half with multiple inspections, additional fees to get that house built. We're not talking about any more square footage. That's why affordability, we need to deregulate. We need to get out of the way as government. Sometimes the best thing we can do in the legislature is to not do anything at all. Let's leave some of this to the hands of professionals. So affordability right now is a crisis. We want to make sure that families can afford to live. And if we're talking about how important parents are to children, we need to try to become a society where parents can afford to stay home and parent their children. Affordability is a big part of that. I think it's important.
Excellent.
Rhonda, thank you so much. I know with the long list that we gave you, long list you have, this just seems like the tip of the spear, but we thank you so much for rising early this morning and being first out of the gate. We appreciate that, and we wish you much success in the next couple weeks as you continue to push towards this finish line in the primary. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you all for all the great work you do. You truly have been a great partner for many years in the things that I'm advocating for too. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
I'm Brad Payne with FPIW Action.
And I'm Brian Noble with FPIW. Again, we want to remind you that this video is not an endorsement of a candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW, nor FPIW Action. We're simply allowing you to meet the candidate. Let's go out there and love our neighbor by faithfully stewarding the public square. And if you're an FPIW defender, go out there and defend and advance biblical values in the public square. God bless.